Hey guys, what's happening? It's me, Topher from Tono's Everything Real Estate Group. This is Financial Fridays, where I teach you about personal finance and you get to respond in the comment section. Today what I want to talk about is an interesting comment that was made by one of the chief economists at CIBC Bank right here in Canada. And he said this week that the housing market is out of reach for most Canadians, and what most millennials and Gen Z should be doing is aspiring to be lifelong renters. That's exactly what he said. There's nothing wrong with being a lifelong renter. And hey, there is nothing wrong if that is your choice. But if you only aspire to be a lifelong renter, you are missing out on something called generational wealth, and you will not be helping your family or loved ones to the max. And even if it's not family or loved ones, and you want to leave your entire wealth to a charity, that's fantastic. So that gives you even more reason to invest and create wealth. So I want to explain something. Back in the medieval times, the medieval ages in the 15th century, there was something called the feudal land tenure system. And Canada is really something called a social democracy. And social democracy is very similar to what we had back in the 15th century. Back in the 15th century, you had landlords and landowners that owned all of the land, and they rented out their land to tenants. So 1% of the population owned the land, everybody else was a tenant. This was called servitude. And basically, people had to work on the land for lords, and then they had to pay taxes. Sounds pretty similar to Canada? You got it, because we pay one of the highest tax rates in the world by far, and that's social democracy. It has its pros and cons. We've got a big social safety net. We take care of a lot of people, but the minority of people pay the most taxes in Canada. So what is going on today? So the Bank of Canada and CIBC says, hey, you know what? We got to build more purpose-built rental apartments, and that's where they want people living. And we're seeing that as a global trend. And what's happening is the 1% continues to grow in their wealth, and the majority of people, the 99% and the middle class, continues to shrink. And that's a big problem, because what that creates is back to a system that we had back in the Middle Ages, a hierarchy, where you had a king, a bishop, the church, the barons, and the lords controlling everything, and then the renters, who had zero control and had zero ability to pass on any wealth to future generations. So the majority of the population back in the Middle Ages were peasants. And peasants had to work hard. And guess what? This is a real stat. Back in the Middle Ages, young people, peasants, lived to an average age of only 30 years old. And why? Because they were worked to death. And you know what? When you are wealthy, you can take care of your health, you can take care of your family, and you can take care of your community. Without wealth, you're just working day to day. Average age of death, 30 years old in the Middle Ages. So people passed on zero inheritance at 30 years old, and the cycle started over. Today in Canada, we have the Bank of Canada, which lends money out to our 6 big banks. So in the US, there are tons of banks, community banks. Some cities have up to 20, 30, 40 banks. In Canada, we have 6 Schedule A banks, like your RBCs, your TD Bank, your Bank of Montreal. So the Bank of Canada and the Canadian government run finances, and they own crown corporations which oversee big ministries, and all of these big ministries control a massive part of our economy. And that has a big influence on how things are run and how the trickle-down wealth effect happens. So when the Bank of Canada lends money to all these Schedule A banks, it's really lending money to itself. And when you put your money in a savings or checkings account, they give you nothing in return. They give you less than 1%. But they take your money, and you know what they do with it? They lend your money out, and they usually make 3, 4, 5%. They invest your money, and they invest it in things like the stock market, in real estate, and other assets. And then they charge you fees, all on your own money, while you're only making 1%. How do you beat the system? That's what I want to teach you. So if you're a lifelong renter and you pay tax and own nothing in the end, you get nowhere. What do you need to be? A landowner, an investor. You got to think big, just like the government and the big banks. And that is the only way to make money. So as the 1% continues to grow, and more so than ever during coronavirus, the serfs go to zero. And the serfs were the servitude peasants. And we're just like the peasants today. And the Bank of Canada and the government loves it. And they're making us believe that it's okay to be a renter, because you know what? The wealth belongs to the elites, the 1%. And it shouldn't be that way. You just need to get educated. And just like in the medieval times, people weren't educated. You need to get educated. And I'm not saying that people aren't educated, but they're not about financial education. And this is what you got to know. You want to grow your money, you got to invest it. So unless you invest in real estate, stocks, hedges like Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, you're never going to have generational wealth, and there will be no inheritance for your kids, your loved ones, or the charity of your choice. So no power equals no equity. And what is equity? Over time, you build equity in a property. If anybody would have bought a detached property in the city of Toronto just 10 years ago, you could have bought a single detached bungalow for $750,000. Today, that single detached bungalow in a community like Etobicoke or some of the other communities in Toronto is approximately $1.5 million. That's the equity and appreciation in that home. There's no other way to get that kind of appreciation or equity unless you invest in things like real estate. Globalization trends towards rental communities, and that is a big trend. But you can buck that trend, you can take a chance, you got to have courage, and you got to start investing and think like the big players. At the end of the day, they're going to take your bank savings and they're going to invest your money, and you're going to get nothing out of it. How do you protect yourself from getting nothing out of it? Start investing today. Buy real estate. Now is a better time than ever. People say there's a bubble. They've been saying that for the last 50 years. In the 1980s, when house and condo prices were at their peak, they said it was a bubble. But guess what? Houses at that time were $300,000. And again, they said there was another bubble in the 2000s. And again, they're saying there's another bubble now. When you look back in 10 years, there will always be a bubble every decade because it's cyclical. But guess what? As immigration and population grows, real estate prices trend up. So listen, guys, do yourself a favor, buy some real estate, buy and invest and hold. That's the key. Follow me at Toe Knows Everything. This was Friday Financial Education. Follow me on Instagram at Toe Knows Everything and GTA Sportsplex. Take care, everybody.